Hey, Jeff and Cole here from the Tryhard Academy podcast, letting you know that this episode is brought to you by Rogue Knights Gaming, located in Kaiser, Oregon.
Come play with us in one of our 3 family-friendly seating areas, and while you're here, load up your arsenal with the latest and greatest Magic the Gathering singles, D&D products, board games, and much more.
So come on in. Plenty of tables, plenty of space, and a selection of cards that are only surpassed by their down-home family customer service. Rogue Knights Gaming.
Heroes wanted.
Apply within.
Hey, it's Cole here.
And this is Jeff. Welcome on into another episode of the Tryhard Academy podcast, where it's always better to get good rather than get wrecked. This is the Future Sight series, a periodic podcast series about new and upcoming set releases and their relative forecasted impact on the cEDH game space.
Well, it's been a while since we've done a set review video like this, and it's about time we got back in the saddle and ride again. In fact, it's so good, we're going to do this set and review in a 2-parter. In fact, it's almost like AMPM. Too much good stuff.
You know, you're not wrong. This set is just like that AMPM slogan. It's way too much good stuff and open 24/7. You know, we're recording this episode on Halloween, and today might be Halloween, but this is no trick, ladies and gentlemen. Just on what's been released in this set alone, this set is straight fire, bordering on disgusting, and we mean that on a good way.
Oh yeah, no. Before we start though, we'll let you know right now there are some cards we would consider maybes and or fun stuff that would be good in regular Commander game and not in the cEDH one. Will be put down in the description below the video. For those who are listening to the Anchor podcast platform, the list will also be in the description of the audio.
Sure.
And without further ado, let's kick it off with some of the mechanics that are returning from this set.
Certainly. Let's first look at the returning mechanics. Those are Cascade, Monarch, and Partner. For the Partner mechanic, we're talking about the OG Partner mechanic from 2016, from Seed 16. And we'll get into that in just a second. First, the Cascade Mechanic. The Cascade Mechanic says, whenever you cast a spell that has Cascade, reveal cards off the top of your library into exile until you hit a non-land card with a converted mana cost of 1 CMC less than the spell you just casted. You may then cast that card for free without paying its mana cost. You then put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in any order. In a random order, correction.
Yep.
The Monarch mechanic involves you being the Monarch and getting a certain buff or giving your opponents a debuff or having some certain special ability as a result of it. It also allows you to draw a card at the end of your turn. If you are dealt combat damage from an opponent, that player then becomes the Monarch.
Yep. But there's a new mechanic in this set called Encore.
Yes. And for the Encore set, before we talk on that, we have the OG partners returning from C16. That is a beautiful thing. We'll talk more about that in the reviews of reprints. But as far as the new mechanic, let's touch on our Encore. And for this, we're going to use Phyrexian Triniform as an example. So the Encore mechanic says, pay a certain mana cost and then exile this creature from your graveyard. For each opponent that you are fighting against, you put a token copy of this creature onto the battlefield until the end of turn. Those creatures gain haste. You then sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step.
You know, first, to put it simply, the Encore mechanic is basically a fixed version of Unearth, mixed with the Embalm mechanic from Amonkhet block. So, for example, if you would normally use the Unearth mechanic on a creature with Unearth, for example, like Fate Stitcher,
Yep.
the Unearth ability would then put the actual physical creature on the battlefield with haste.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, instead, you exile the creature out of your yard and then create the number of token copies based on the number of opponents you have.
Exactly. In fact, I would probably venture to guess that the reason why they created the Encore mechanic was so that way effects like Deadeye Navigator, for example, could prevent a player from abusing the Unearth mechanic.
Now, let's talk about a handful of the reprints here that have definitely caught our attention.
Yes, let's start off with the OG partner reprints from C16. We're talking, of course, Thrasios, Timna, Vile Smasher, and all the other C16 partners.
Oh yeah, no, we've been asking for those for a while now, and they've delivered. Another reprint that we've gotten that we've been looking forward to.
Yep.
Nagila Blade Blossom.
Yep, Nagila Tempo has been a hot fire deck within the cEDH game space, especially online. And when you're talking about a card that literally does a 2-card combo with any one of 3 or 4 different cards,
Yeah.
that's a sure win in my book as far as I'm concerned. This card has been needing a reprint since it was released in Battle Bond.
Almost definitely. And speaking of reprints, a reprint that's been 20 years in the making.
Yes.
Portal 3K's 3 Visits is now back in play.
Thank freaking God. Before this card was even spoiled, this card was $100 plus common.
About $110. It's still about the time of this recording this video. It still is about $110, the original printing. But you could pick up your own version of 3 Visits from this set in the pre-value, $1.
You're talking
Pre-orders.
The pre-orders for this card is $1.
Yeah.
That's obscene. Considering the fact that this is effectively a Nature's Lore before
Nature's Lore.
Nature's Lore was Nature's Lore. And if I'm wrong on the timing on that, please feel free to comment in the comments down below and tell me I'm wrong. Nature's Lore was, I think, originally printed in Portal. Does that seem about right?
Somewhere in there. It's
somewhere.
It's either, I think, maybe even got printed in 4th edition.
Well, I don't know about that. But the point, of course, is that 3 Visits was effectively a Nature's Lore. Before Nature's Lore was Nature's Lore. And this kind of a card is valuable for any green variant deck that wants to, get their extra ramp out. So by all means, yeah, this is a great reprint.
Speaking of valuable reprints, Rings of Bright Earth have made a return.
Yeah, I saw that from Lorwyn. My goodness. How long has it been since that card's been printed? Aside from the masterpiece, that doesn't count.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, no, this card hasn't ever seen a reprint since its original reprinting in the Lorwyn block. And my goodness, this card was sitting around $50-$60 easy.
Oh, yeah, no.
Before this son of a gun got reprinted. It's great to see it finally get the reprint treatment it deserves.
Yep. Another card that got a reprint, Vampiric Tutor. We've been looking for this one.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, Vampiric Tutor has been bordering on, $100?
Oh, yeah.
And that card in and of itself goes into almost any black variant deck.
Speaking of a card that could go in practically every deck, Command Beacon got another reprint.
I'm glad to see Command Beacon get that reprint. That card was sitting at over $30 as of the time of this recording. And a card like Command Beacon typically was used in Stax variant decks that involved MLD, like Rurikthar Stax, for example, that wants their commander back in their hand. Alternatively, you could also run it in Gitrog Monster if you really wanted to as a way to get your Gitrog back.
Zur the Enchanter, your favorite little buddy, got a reprint.
Zur the Disenfranchiser. I love me some Zur. This guy rates around, 50 Shades of Zur with me. Do not ask how high my devotion is. I will not tell you. But anyway, as far as Zur is concerned, yes, this guy has been a mainstay since the days of Cold Snap and got a reprint in MM3. This card actually ended up getting up to about the $10-$15 range.
I wouldn't believe it.
And that's not counting the Judge promo version.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, $50, $60? And now that we're getting a reprint with the Judge promo art on it, I find a card like this to be a valuable boon for anybody who wants to actually, pick up Zur and just play with it.
Picking up another card here, Scroll Rack.
Scroll Rack is a beautiful, beautiful inclusion. I have not seen that card reprinted except as a masterpiece in the Kaladesh block. Card was originally printed in Tempest, if memory serves me right.
Yep, sounds about right.
And this card has been instrumental in non-blue variant decks that want that card advantage, that also run, in some cases, ad nauseum, because sometimes you don't pick up the right half of your deck. I mean, that's just the reality of your situation. This kind of a card helps out with card filtration, especially if you're using it in conjunction with Ponder, Preordain, Fetch Lands, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, land tax, Scroll Rack combos.
I love it.
Another universal card we got here, Staff of Domination got a reprint.
Thank God. This card was sitting at how much?
Try $60 a copy.
That's dumb. Don't get me wrong, this card is a Swiss Army knife. I really like this card. You can use it in any number of stacks variant builds that could easily make use of it. And this card will get you a head-on advantage in various different ways, whether it's tapping down creatures and blockers, if you need to get in, or preventing people from attacking you as a pseudo fog effect, assuming you have the mana for it, extra card draw, extra life, who gives a rat's?
Yeah,
it does it.
It does it all. And a couple other universally good reprints. Preordain and Arcane Signet.
Speaking of Preordain, I'm glad to see a card like this getting reprinted, but more importantly, Arcane Signet. That card got released in the Brawl decks for Throne of Eldraine, and when that son of a gun dropped, it was, what, a $15, $20 card?
Yep.
As of recent, it's been more along the lines of, like, $5 to $6, I think.
Actually, I think you could pick up copies in less than that. They've been spamming the production of this card lately, and quite frankly, not else. The cheaper this card gets, the happier I am.
You're not wrong. I mean, considering the fact that this is a selfish Felwar Stone, why not?
Yeah, Felwar Stone's dirt cheap.
Of course, Preordain is a classic cantrip for blue. If you're running any sort of a blue variant deck, you're probably running this and Ponder and or Serum Vision, Sleight of Hand, whatever you want to.
Yeah. No, but that's with the reprints that we see so far.
Sure.
Now let's actually talk about the new stuff.
Thank goodness some of these cards have been printed and have made my acquaintance. Thank you, Wizards.
Well, let's kick it all off with some of the first spoilers ever revealed that we really got hyped for.
Yep.
The Battle Bond Land Cycle completion.
Yep, we're talking about Training Center, Undergrowth Stadium, Vault of Champions, Spectator Seating, and Rejuvenating Springs. The ally versions of these cards have made their ways into 2, 3, and in some cases 4C decks.
Oh, yeah, no.
And obviously their inclusion has been a boon as far as non-basic lands are concerned. Having this set finally completed is a beautiful boon for people who are wanting to build mana bases on a budget.
Oh, most definitely.
At this point, I want to see them print the tangos and the bicycles. You know what? While we're at it, since Christmas is also coming soon, please, can I put this on my wish list, Wizards? Reprint the Zendikar Fetches and the Imperial Seal from original P3K as well.
Those cards are getting way too expensive.
They are. Please, pretty please? For little Timmy over here? No. No.
All right.
But let's key on.
Oh, most definitely. Kicking it all off on the number 2 on the countdown here. Kadama of the East Tree.
I'm glad that you brought this card. I like this card, and the reason why is because of a particular rule in Magic the Gathering related to auras, and you normally see this in play with something like Stonehewer Giant or with Zur the Enchanter. The rule that I'm talking about is Rule 303.4F, and that rule reads as follows. If an aura is entering the battlefield under a player's control by any means other than by resolving as an aura spell, and the effect putting it onto the battlefield doesn't specify the object or player the aura will enchant, that player chooses what it will enchant as the aura enters the battlefield. This is particularly seen with Zur the Enchanter and in casual funsy decks running Stonehewer Giant, where you literally put an equipment or an aura directly onto the field and you just directly attach it. The reason why this is important is because whenever you play a particular combo piece, if you play the more expensive of the 2 combo pieces, then the other one gets dropped for free using Kadama of the East Tree. We'll give you an example. Let's say you drop
Great Oak Guardian.
Great Oak Guardian, great example. You could drop Splinter Twin right onto it with no problem. It would just directly attach. Additionally, you could even drop Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker.
Yep. Zealous Conscripts, Kiki Jiki, Splinter Twin. This card is kind of universal. Heck,
yeah.
If at the very worst, you play a permanent, you play a land.
Yep, and at a very bare minimum, this son of a gun is an exploration effect on crack. And here's where it gets really funny. Let's say you have cards like Sakura Tribe Scout that let you put extra lands onto the battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. Guess what? Kadama of the East Tree will see that happen.
Yep. Not just play one land,
but play
just
2
lands.
That's right.
Oh boy, and speaking of lands, let's talk about our next one down on the list.
Yeah. AC, Tyrant of the Epicycle Strait. When I saw this card, I about lost my mind. This card is a 6 CMC, 4 blue and a green, 5/5 legendary serpent that says, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. It also says, whenever you have a land enter the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. And that may word is what I think gives not only Tatiova a run for her money, but in some cases actually supersedes her for Tatiova land builds.
Most definitely. And the fact is, though, is that the Serpent not only has an exploration effect stapled onto him, which Tatiova doesn't even have in the first place. That draw trigger is a May ability. By the way, May abilities are so relevant.
Yeah, they are, because you don't want to ever deck yourself. So, in a situation like this, especially if you're having to deal with somebody else's opposing Notion Thief, that way you don't give them an extra card by proxy.
Most definitely.
As far as this particular commander is concerned, I could see it replacing Tatiova Benthic Druid just for the exploration effect alone.
Oh, yeah. No.
Not that Tatiova is a bad card. I could see her easily slotting into the 99 in a deck like this.
Oh, most definitely. Speaking of a card that could pretty much be slotted almost anywhere, although some of the hype around it's a little bit overshot, in my opinion. However, though, Jewel Bloatus, nonetheless, is a very decent card for a very good handful of cEDH decks here.
I'm inclined to completely agree with that. Monocolor fast combo cEDH decks with commanders that are 6 CMC and less will completely profit from this card, but it will have diminishing returns. In decks that are 4 CMC and below that are 2 colors, you can kind of get away with this card as long as you have a second land on the field or a land that is of alternate color. In 5 and 6 CMC decks, and really no higher than 6 CMC, you would want those to be monocolor decks. We're talking about Godo Bandit Warlord, Sidisi Ad Nauseam Fishbowl if you still choose to run that,
TCV stacks,
Teferi Chainveil stacks, Urza Powered Scepter, Urza Poly Tyrant if you choose to run that too. Yisan will love this card, by the way.
Oh yeah, no. Any commander that has basically 2 or less colors, alright, are going to love this card. If you play 4 color decks, this card is no good for you.
It'll probably not be all that helpful just because of the fact that it's 3 mana of 1 color as a one-time shot. And unfortunately, since you have to use it for your commander, and Black Lotus is banned for very good reason, unfortunately it does provide diminishing returns in that respect.
In the long run, yes.
Emery decks also, that reminds me. Emery, Lurker of the Lock, will also make beautiful use of this card too.
Yep.
But don't let Hyperbole cost you money. This card is not worth $150. 20 to 25 on the top end, maybe. 15 to 20, that's reasonable.
Yep.
150, no.
Speaking of a card that'll actually go pretty good, in fact, Jessica's Will makes almost a nearly perfect inclusion for really any Godo deck.
You're completely right. Now, this particular card says for 2 and a red, add a number of red mana equal to the number of cards in target opponent's hand. It also says exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So, in a situation like this with Godo, the first thing that I think of is Reiterate because it has buyback.
Yep.
And so what that means is without cost reducers, you would need, 10 cards normally?
You need about 10 mana to kick it off, and you have to have an opponent with 7 or more cards in hand.
Right.
And keep it going.
Now, with cost reducers, obviously that gets a lot more manageable. And I could see this as a backup combo that could, in theory, be filtered into Godo Bandit Warlord's Godo Helm cEDH deck as a combo kind of like Twin Flame.
Yeah, kind of like Twin Flame. I could see it.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what it goes on in the long run. However, though, it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out.
Oh, completely agree with that. I mean, at a very bare minimum, it's a ramp spell, and at a very bare minimum by itself, it's a draw spell by proxy.
Yep.
This seems like a shoo-in for me.
Oh, yeah, no. Red's been desperate for card draw. However, though, speaking of something that has been absolutely dumb in the recent days.
Yes.
Opposition Agent. Woo, boy.
Dear God in heaven, what have you done, Wizards? Thank you for printing this card. I really, really like this card. And I'm saying this as a Sidisi Ad Nauseam player. Just on that alone, I'm mad at this card. But at the same token, as a now Stacks player as well, I completely appreciate the value of this card. You flash this in response to anybody fetching a land, or a demonic tutor, my goodness, it will break them. And that's not counting other people that will get mad at you. Now, a thing to be considerate of is other people playing their own versions of Opposition Agent, because if they play an Opposition Agent after you do, their effect will overwrite yours. That's very important because of time stamping, however you want to call that.
Yep.
The point of which is, if someone plays an Opposition Agent after you play it, you're going to be in a big, big world of hurt. So that means you're going to have to protect your Opposition Agent from others, as well as other clone spells. But this card beautifully works with Marilyn of the Morn song.
Oh, that's a degenerate lockout right there.
You know, Black has needed a stranglehold for a while, and this is the card to do it. I can easily see this card being a money card. We're talking $50+.
Oh, yeah.
I see this card being a multi-format all-star, especially in Legacy and Vintage.
Oh, boy, that's degenerate right there.
I like it. You want to make some people salty? Drop this in off of a Dark Ritual.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of a universal card, though, War Room.
I like this card. It is basically 3 tap, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander, you draw a card. So, for colorless decks, this is colorless card draw. Colorless card draw is a beautiful thing.
This is like the best card draw for colorless decks. In fact, even Minocchio and Gaia Reach Sanitarium.
You're thinking Makokoro, Center of the Seed,
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're talking about card draw, especially in white, God forbid.
Oh, boy.
Makokoro, Center of the Sea, and Gaia Reach Sanitarium, along with Truce and Temporary Truce, are pretty much the best that white has, not counting Survival Cash, but that doesn't exactly count because of the rebound. But, you know, when you're talking about raw draw spells for white, yeah, white does not have that. Having something like this, though, will help them out.
Now, talking about another commander here, especially for slowing down the game.
Yep, and living in the slow lane.
Yep. Let's talk about our new resident master, Master Uruguay. Or he's better known as...
Archelos, Lagoon Mystic. Archelos is a beautiful card for stasis-styled stacks decks. So what this card says, insofar as the Oracle text is concerned, is that as long as it is untapped, permanents enter the battlefield untapped. But if it is tapped, permanents enter the battlefield tapped. So it's kind of like an on-off switch version of Root Maze.
Yeah. Combine this card with, like, let's say things like Springleaf Drum.
Sure. Springleaf Drum would be a great example of making use of it. And you would also play cards like Amulet of Vigor and, like I said, Root Maze, Back to Basics, Winter Orb, Static Orb, any number of freeze effects, quote unquote, make people's lives hard. You know, you're talking Frozen Aether.
Oh, yeah, no, we're being as slow. We're just making this game as slow as a tortoise race.
Yeah, life is not a race.
However, though, going back to the fast lane a little bit here.
Sure.
Let's talk about Court of Bounty.
Court of Bounty is a 4 CMC enchantment, 2 and 2 green, that says when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you are the Monarch, you get to choose between putting a land or a creature onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you put a land onto the battlefield. I personally like this card.
At the bare minimum, you know what this card sounds like?
Exploration.
Most definitely. And at the best, you know what else? I don't know, sneak in some creature? Or sneak in a creature of your choice? I don't know, combo piece, stacks piece?
Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation.
There you go.
Good. I like it. Whoever said T.O. needs flash, right? Just sneaking it on your upkeep.
Oh, funny part about it is, you could use this card in conjunction with Command Beacon.
I completely agree with it. In fact, that I think would be one of the best ways to make use of it. Would be just crack Command Beacon in response to the upkeep trigger, put your commander in your hand, dump it on the field.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be funny, especially if you pair it with Crucible of Worlds.
Oh, yeah, no. However, though, speaking of commanders...
Yes.
Obeka Brute Chronologist.
This particular Grixis commander catches my interest from the perspective of Isochron Scepter and Final Fortune. I could see this being an Isochron Scepter deck where you're taking infinite turns and then using those infinite turns to power into some sort of a Grixis-oriented win, whether it's Thassa's Oracle or any sort of other infinite mana combo.
Into a Comet Storm or...
Yeah, it doesn't really
You just
matter.
go wild here. It's just really... The fact is, though, is that you have a legendary version of Sundial the Infinite in your command zone.
Yeah.
And people would be like, oh, you could take other people's turns and make them end their turn. No. You can do that. It is convoluted as all heck.
Right, and realistically, nobody in their right mind would want to end their turn willingly unless they were in an oddball predicament and they had no other choice. Realistically, though, for a competitive EDH environment, this is a Sundial of the Infinite.
Yep. Play Isochron Scepter, Final Fortune. Seems good enough for me.
Yeah, that will get you into infinite turns, assuming nobody can stop you, and then you just go ahead and you win from there.
Talking about some other really good cards out of the set. Magus of the Order.
I am so happy to see this kind of a creature finally get printed on one of the Magusai. This creature is a 4 CMC creature, just like Natural Order, and the only downside really is that you have to pay a green, sack it, and then sack another green creature in order to Natural Order. I'm not exactly a big fan of that, but still, it's a great additional copy for Natural Order if you are the kind of deck that wants to run Natural Order style cards. I really like it for that reason.
Almost definitely. Any type of deck that's running utility green creatures or a big utility creature.
Yeah.
Like, if it's green variant, you can play it. Well, Foreign Collects.
Sure, for funsy decks, you could throw this in there for that exact reason. Me personally, I would use it to go sneak out Collector Roof.
Collector Roof. Vexing Shusher.
Seems good to me.
Alright. Speaking about some dumb stuff, though, let's actually go to one of the big things that we have been thinking about and a project we've been brewing on, actually.
Mm-hmm. We are talking about Gore Muldrak Amphenologist. And when you look at this kind of a card, you're probably thinking to yourself, what in the hell are these guys thinking? And you're right to say that. So, in order to really understand the impact of this card, we have to see what the card actually does in the context of the greater cEDH game space. Normally, this card adds tokens onto the battlefield, whether onto your field or onto your opponent's field, if people control a certain number of creatures more than any other player.
Yep.
Now, in that respect, it's not necessarily a good thing for you because you don't want to get beaten in the face. But the thing that kind of offsets that is the fact that you and permanents that you control have protection from Salamanders. Now, how would we make use of a card like this? Normally in cEDH we would not. However, in Vintage, if you follow Vintage at all, there is a beautiful combo deck called Oath of Druids. There are Oath variant decks out there that utilize the card Oath of Druids, and that's exactly what we're thinking of here.
Oh, most definitely. The big two cards, you gotta remember, we're going to be running 2 creatures in this whole deck. Mm-hmm. Number 1, Laboratory Maniac.
Yep.
Number 2, Sphinx of the Second Sun.
I'm glad that you talked about that. You know, if you're building just a regular casual funsy version of this deck, I could see somebody putting Blightsteel Colossus in this kind of an Oath of Druid style build, and then you could just then use clone spells in order to create multiple copies of it. Alternatively, you could also use Jin-Gitaxias as well. But that's if you're being kind of a douche nugget. Now, a thing to consider with Oath of Druids is Rule 609.3. It comes into play here because of how the effects resolve, kind of like how you were mentioning with Laboratory Maniac.
Yep.
I will explain that rule here. If an effect attempts to do something impossible, it only does as much as possible. So in a real world example, if you're playing 60-card Magic, if somebody casts an Abrupt Decay, which normally can't be countered, and you cast a Remand trying to target it, the Remand part where you put the spell back in their hand will not resolve. But because there is a separate line of text involved with it, the part where it says draw a card, you would still get to draw a card, assuming Remand actually resolved. In the same sense with Oath of Druids, if you have no creatures left in your library and you trigger Oath of Druids, you will end up flopping the rest of your library into your graveyard.
Setting you right up for that draw win.
Exactly, off of a lab man. I like it. And that's where Sphinx of the Second Sun comes in, because Sphinx of the Second Sun says, at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you get an additional beginning phase, which means you get another untap, upkeep, and draw step.
That sounds like a second chance to pop it off to go big.
Yeah, and exactly. That would be the exact reason why you would run a card like that. Because at a bare minimum, you're guaranteed to hit one of two cards, one of which is Labman, the other of which is your
Sphinx.
Your Sphinx.
And all you gotta do is have an ability or copy the effect of both the druids, or have another upkeep through alternative means.
Sure.
The Sphinx.
Paradox Haze is a good example.
Yep.
Anything that would copy a triggered ability such as Strionic Resonator or Lithoform Engine. Any of those things would completely work. Additionally, in case you want to be really, really spicy, you could also run non-creature extra turn spells like Time Warp and Nexus of Fate, which is a great way to keep yourself from decking, to ensure that after landing Oath of Druids and Labman, you'd be guaranteed to deck yourself. In the case of running Nexus of Fate, you could also run Gaia's Blessing, Memory's Journey, and Noxious Revival in case your guy gets blown up and you have to try to reanimate it and put it back on top of your library in order to floop it into play again.
Yep.
I really, really like this commander for this reason, and I think you could easily make a Stacks combo hybrid show that just wins from out of nowhere off of the upkeep.
Almost definitely. Now it's going to be interesting to see if that actually works out or not.
Yeah.
But so far, though, the prototype, though, looks fun.
I really, really do like it. It's the kind of deck that will catch people off guard.
Now, that's all the time we have for this episode of the Future Sight series. This set, as it stands, is looking beautiful.
As soon as we get the rest of the spoilers up for this amazing new set, we will release a part 2 to this video. We expect that the rest of the cards will be spoiled by November 13th, a week before the set's release, which means that this set, by that set's release day, November 20th, we should have the second part of this review up and available for listening on Anchor and viewing on YouTube. Thanks again for watching and listening, and as always, it's always better to get good rather than get wrecked.